Welcome back to the Policy Biz Podcast. I'm your host, Jon Schwabish. This is the final episode of Season 10 of the Policy Biz Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you've enjoyed this season. I have talked to so many great data visualization and presentation practitioners and researchers and analysts. I hope you've learned a lot over the last few years. Over the next couple months, take some time, catch up, relax. You're on the beach, you're hiking, you're hanging out with friends. Throw in your headphones, throw on your AirPods, listen to a couple of episodes, catch up so that you can be ready for the fall, where I've already got folks lined up for another great season of the show. But on this year's season finale of the show, I love saying there's a season finale, by the way, because I get a break from all the work. But on this final episode of the season, I have a special guest, Nancy Organ, author of the new book, Data Visualization for People of All Ages. We talk about what that means, what it means for kids to learn about data and data visualization, and how we can engage them, and the different challenges of teaching data visualization to 5-year-olds and 65-year-olds. We talk about the process of writing, Nancy's process for writing the book. We talk about the challenges about teaching data visualization, and we talk about how we think schools and education programs might integrate data visualization into those curricula. So there's a sort of long, good conversation here about the new book. I hope you'll check it out. It's really, I think, a great book to help you learn the fundamentals of data and data visualization. And so I hope you will check it out at the CRC press site, at Amazon, or wherever you get your books. Now, just a couple things before we go for this season. First off, I want to thank everybody who has listened to the show, all of my guests that have come on over the last 9 or 10 months, and of course, everyone who's helped me build the show, from sound editing to the YouTube channel, to creating the website and all the content. This is not an easy show to put together. It sounds easy. I'm sure you're listening to it like, oh, this is just a breeze. There's a lot that goes into this show, all the way from scheduling to recording to editing to all the materials that go out when the show is produced, along with the newsletter where I write up a little bit about each and every episode. That's first thing. Second thing, if you wouldn't mind, please take a moment to rate or review the podcast on your favorite podcast provider. That might be iTunes, it might be Spotify. Those are kind of, or it might even be on the Zencastr website where I do a lot of the recording. The sort of podcasting market is kind of interesting, how it's evolving, but I think iTunes and Spotify are the primary places. So if you wouldn't mind, please take a moment, leave a rating, leave a review. If you don't want to do that, head over maybe to Amazon and leave a rating or a review for one of my data visualization or presentation books. There's Better Data Visualizations, there's Better Presentations, there's Elevate the Debate, and of course my new book, Data Visualization in Excel. Okay, with that out of the way, I'm going to head over to my interview with Nancy Organ. I hope you will enjoy it. I hope you'll learn a lot. Again, thanks so much for tuning into the show. Have a great summer. And here's the final episode of this 10th season of the show, my interview with Nancy Organ, author of the new book, Data Visualization for People of All Ages. Hi, Nancy. Great to see you. Great to meet you. I guess, like...
Great to meet you.
Right?
In person, like, for real?
Yeah,
at the same time?
For real. Yeah. As opposed to, like, endless emails, and I'm sure, like, attending the same thing simultaneously that we never, like... Yeah.
Totally. The smallest world.
Smallest world, yeah. Especially the data viz world, right? Like the smallest
Absolutely.
world. So thanks for coming on the show. Great new book.
Thank you.
Data visualization for people of all ages. Yeah, we have our matching copies.
I also have my poster in the background.
And your poster in the back, right? Yeah. You've got like the data viz theme in the back. Mine is a little bit more hectic than that. So I'm excited to chat with you about writing a data viz book for all ages, like, thinking about everybody.
Yes.
But maybe we can start with intros and to give, and it's a little easy for you to be like, oh, I did this, that, and the other, but maybe sort of talk about, where you started and how you got to the point where you're like, there needs to be this book and I'm ready to write it.
Totally. Great. Well, so I'm Nancy. That is true. if we'll start the
Yeah,
present,
start there. Yeah.
in the
Okay.
present tense. So more than anything, I'm a data viz practitioner, which means that my career, my days are dedicated to using data visualization to help people share what's the most important to them. Um, so I say all the time that my job is the fun part of so
Hmm.
many scientific and analytical pursuits, because I get to take the end result, or that's a little hand wavy. We work on it the full trajectory, but I get to make it impactful and actionable and pretty and fun and expressive. So yeah, my job is the fun part. My academic background though was in statistics, and actually started my career in medical research. But
Oh,
obviously, medical research uses quite a bit of visualization, so that's kind of where I got my first exposure. And then when I realized that it's this marvelous confluence of technical thinking and creativity and relationships and expression, um, I decided to focus solely on that, and have this ability to interact with so many different fields, and like I said,
mm,
so many different things that people care about.
yeah.
Yeah, so that's what I'm doing now. But as far as why write a book and why set out to do something so absurd as to write something for everyone, right? It's like, what's more canonical than the expression of like, you can't please everybody, and
Right.
then to say,
Right.
oh,
Everybody's going to
but
read
I
this book.
can,
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
right? Who am I to
Yeah.
say,
Yeah.
right? But I did. I did say that, and I think we did a pretty good job. We being myself and my fabulous editors, Tamar Munsner and Alberto Cairo.
Hmm.
I think we've done it, or as close to doing it as possible.
Hmm.
So why? I had this. It was a couple years ago. It was during the pandemic, right? So we had a lot of time alone with ourselves,
Yeah.
and I had just taught a class at the University of Washington, and I had just recently been working at Microsoft with so many brilliant adults. And I realized in this like flash of light that I'm spending all of this time either at work or teaching or wherever explaining to adults these very fundamental concepts of data visualization, even if it's their own work or it's just part of their day-to-day routine, right? And I saw
Hmm.
this gap. I was like, wow, these brilliant people are using this tool without ever having truly sat down or had the opportunity to learn what they're doing, to learn what it means to visualize.
Mm.
We've taken math classes, we've taken grammar classes, people have learned how to code, people have taken science classes. We've learned everything peripheral to data visualization while using it, but we haven't sat down and learned what does it mean to visualize.
Hmm.
And if I'm teaching them, who's teaching their kids? So,
Yeah.
a quick Google at the time, right now, we're lucky over the past 2 years, more content, more resources for young people have started to emerge in the
Yeah.
database space. But at the time, there was very, very little, and certainly nothing in mainstream circulation. So I said, okay, well, who's teaching them? No one. What if that's me? What if we go for it? Right?
Right. Yeah.
Um, so we did. And I felt like it was important to reach everybody in one go, because you and I may have our bookshelves full of
Yeah.
database textbooks. I think that is, bold statement, a minority of people.
Yeah.
And
100%.
so,
Yeah.
with the operating assumption that most people will only ever read one database book, can I get that book, that one book that's going to be in someone's house? Can I make something where a grown up on Wall Street feels cool having it on their desk, and a fifth grader in North Carolina feels cool having it in their backpack?
So, yeah, I don't know if that fifth grader is ever going to feel cool with it. I mean, there's the rare fifth
Yeah.
grader feels cool with a data book in
Yeah.
their backpack. But I get your point. I get your
Yeah.
point. Um, so how do you go about trying to like find the sweet spot
Hmm.
in not just the style of the writing, right? Because you
Hmm.
can write differently for the fifth grader versus the 30-year-old,
Sure, sure.
but also in the examples you use. So we were sort of,
Right.
as we were talking before prepping for
Mm-hmm.
recording, I was
Mm-hmm.
talking about how like the first example in the book is on ice
Yeah.
cream. Now everybody gets ice cream. And so
Yeah.
that I see is like for all ages. Now, had you started the book with like per capita GDP or like,
Sure.
government funding for a program, like that's clearly for the
Right.
30-year-old, right? But how do
Right.
you
Right.
sort of think about threading the needle to kind of, meet the needs of both?
Totally. Um, yes, ice cream is for everybody, and I stand by this. And I love this. I think it's just such a funny little quirk of people that the ice cream example has come up in a couple conversations. Like even when I started writing it, right? We sat down
Yeah,
as a team, we're like, is this too young if we're going for all ages?
right.
But right, everyone knows ice cream. So my compromise there was to, instead of having kind of simple traditional flavors, to make more interesting flavors, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
horchata flavored ice cream and red
Yeah,
velvet or pumpkin pie. So I used my local Seattle ice cream shop as inspiration. I was like, what would they do? What kind of
right.
interesting flavors would they have? Because I go there, right? And I'm not getting the typical strawberry chocolate vanilla. I'm getting the whatever, you know,
Right. Okay, so now
matcha
before
sesame.
you go
So
on though,
that was how I solved that.
yeah, but
Yeah.
before you go on, so what is this
Yeah.
just for the Seattle people,
Oh,
what is this ice cream shop that you like to go to?
oh, Frankie and Joe's.
Okay. All right. Good to know.
Yeah.
All right.
10 out
So
of 10.
next time I'm in Seattle, I'm just going to mark
Yes.
it down. That's my next
I would
spot. Okay,
say
great.
I've had a bad habit of having ice cream for dinner. That's not a great place to do that because it's very rich. So I would
Okay. All
keep
right.
the conventional order in that case, but that's my
Right.
only word of caution with
Okay.
respect to ice cream.
All right. So
Yeah.
this is good. So folks are sort of getting a little bit of the like literally
Yes.
Seattle flavor from this conversation. So that's a good
Totally.
start. Yeah. Okay,
Yes,
great.
absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. So, right. So the examples, that's the kind of one way that I dealt with the tone.
Mhm.
Another thing that really inspired me was Reddit. Have you seen the subreddit Explain It Like I'm Five?
I don't believe I
I don't know if
have,
you use
but
Reddit. Okay.
yeah.
So there's a subreddit, right? There's a page on Reddit where people ask questions and they can be simple or complicated and they say, I just don't understand this. Can you explain it to me as if I were a 5-year-old?
Mhm.
And that's so delightful and magical to me. Because if you can explain something complicated in simple terms,
Mhm.
that's when you truly understand it.
Yeah.
And most things, it's not that they are too hard to understand. You may just need some more time to understand it, right?
Mhm.
Things are complicated, but everything is solvable. Everything is made of small pieces that, taken bit by bit, can be digestible. So I use that as kind of inspiration and motivation to say, all right, well, I think we can tackle almost anything in simple terms. And if
Mhm.
I'm having trouble explaining something in simple terms, that doesn't mean stop. That just means take the complicated part of it and break that down further.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's why I mean the first chapter is what is data? Like let's start
Right.
from the very atomic unit of
Mhm.
data visualization. Let's assume nothing and go from there, right? We all learn to
Yeah.
speak, you
Right.
know.
Yeah, yeah. No, you need to be able to kind of speak
Yeah.
that basic language.
Yeah.
Um there's not, again, thinking about all ages, and most
Hmm.
data viz books don't do this. There's
Yeah.
not more on sort of like the data of like how to process data, how to work with data, where to get data. That probably is like that's several
Right.
books. But did you think
Yes.
about sort of those kind of the intervening steps of here's what data, definition of data,
Right.
then there's the how do you get it, how do you work with it, how do you analyze it, and then here's the visualization piece. I mean, I don't think there's
Yeah.
many books that sort of data viz books that sort of fill in
The whole
that
thing.
gap there. Yeah, the whole thing.
I did I did think about it. I decided to not go there. So this
Mm-hmm.
is purely visualization in the sense of, what we reveal at the end and what, practitioners know as just encoding information onto something perceptible. Not
Mm-hmm.
even just visual, perceptible, right? I have the chapter on sound and touch too for that exact reason. This is more than just, this is not a taxonomy, a practice of taxonomy where you take, oh, this concept needs this type of graph. this type of data can be shown with any
Mm-hmm.
number of different encodings. It can be abstracted in any number of ways. That's what visualizing is, right?
Yeah.
We can put all the pieces together later, and that's surely part of it. But at the crux, right? You're just mapping your encoding.
Yeah.
So I focused on that. Um, we have to stop somewhere, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
also very intentionally didn't include any visuals that are statistically focused. There's no
Mm-hmm.
box plots, there's no violin charts, there's no ROC curves, right? We
Right.
stayed
Yeah.
away from those um, because those are ultimately also just little blobs of encoding.
Right.
You can get there once you know what visualization means.
Yeah.
And same with
Uh,
data collecting and analyzing. I think just
yeah.
beyond the scope. And I had already doubled what I had contracted to do, so I needed to
I had the
stop
same
somewhere.
experience when I wrote my book for them too. I don't
Yeah,
know. Maybe they
yeah.
just underestimate like what we're gonna
Hmm.
write. I don't know. Um,
Yes.
have you? You mentioned having worked with and taught folks and done work as a freelancer. Have you worked
Yeah.
with kids like and and how did that work inform
Hmm.
how you wrote the book and sort of like the circular piece of like getting feedback and going back and forth
Totally.
and yeah.
Um, Personally, I had not worked with kids before writing this, so I
Mm,
fully
okay.
admit that. I will defend, though, I have been a kid. So I
Okay.
know
All
that that
right. Yeah.
experience is not all of it, right? I've
Yeah.
not parented, I have not been a school teacher, sure. But constantly present in my mind throughout this book was what would 10-year-old Nancy have wanted to see? What would
Hmm.
she have understood? Where would she have gotten hung up? Where would she have been more curious? Where would she be impatient and no, I need to give the payoff a little bit sooner because you're losing
Hmm.
focus because it's a lot to take in.
Yeah.
So granted, that's an audience of one, but as special as we like to think we are, I know that's true for myself. Ultimately, that is limited. If it works for one 10-year old,
Yeah.
my hope at least was that that would resonate with more.
Yeah.
And there's also very intentionally not an age number put on here
Right.
because things, everybody's different. And maybe
Yeah.
for some people, they just won't be interested in it until they're 15 or 65. And somebody may love it and just soak it up at 5, right? Who am I to
Hmm.
say, right? I don't want
Yeah.
to. I don't want to impose any assumptions on people.
Right.
Um, but my target audience was 10-year-old Nancy.
Gotcha. And then at the end of each chapter, there's it depends on the chapter, obviously, but there's at least a couple of pages, maybe up
Hmm.
to 5 or 6 pages, depending on the chapter, of exercises.
Hmm.
And in your head, was that for the 10-year-old Nancy, or was that for 65-year-old Nancy? Or for like everybody?
Sure, sure. That was I made them. The solutions are in the back, right? There's
Right. Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
You can just look up
It's-
what the answer is.
yeah. Yeah.
So I didn't. I wanted something where you know, maybe someone learning independently, a young person, adult, whoever, could kind of test their understanding there in a very low stakes, kind of accepting way, right? All the
Yeah.
solutions say, oh, you could do this a variety of way. But the
Hmm.
important thing here is that you understand this component. But it's also, I wanted to make sure that I didn't rule out classroom usage. I know there's a
Hmm.
full gamut of complexities to getting new material in school systems,
Yeah.
but having no exercises would pretty much eliminate that possibility altogether. So I wanted
Hmm.
some exercises where, in an education environment, the teachers were equipped with something they didn't have to
Yeah.
think of it
Right.
themselves.
Yeah.
So that's for it's there if you need it, but
Hmm.
I don't think there's no like new content revealed in them that would
Hmm.
prohibit continuing through
Yeah.
if you didn't just get
Um,
through it.
the other big thing I wanted to ask about was your take on data viz rules. So I
Mm-hmm.
notice you have a
Mm-hmm.
section on like bar chart should start at 0, and
Yes.
you have a thing on like, and then there's a section on like 3D, like be
Mm-hmm.
careful, and then you have a
Mm-hmm.
section at the end, like a chapter at the end that's like here are ways to kind of distort or mislead. Um,
Right.
but my read of the book is that we're sort of similar in this way, that there aren't really
Hmm.
rules. It's a creative medium. And
Yeah.
so I guess if I were to sort of distill that down to one question, like, what is your philosophy on data viz rules versus kind of like loose guidelines kind of
Sure,
thing,
sure,
or
sure.
just like it's a wild wild west and go for it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think no, I love this question. And it comes up almost daily in
Yeah.
my practice, right? Because everyone wants to be, for the most part, and Alberto had this in his book, How Charts Lie, right? A very strong
Hmm.
emphasis on most people don't mean anything bad, right?
Right.
Most mistakes, most lying in visualization, even though we get a really bad rap for being misleading, I would say most of it is really well intentioned. So that's why I call the
Hmm.
chapter "Whoopsies," because right, instead of something more sinister.
Yeah.
Um, I think the only real rule is don't lie, don't
Mm.
be dishonest, and that includes don't be unintentionally dishonest. You need to know how that can occur, accidentally, so that you don't. Right, like the bar charts is a great example. I can totally understand, and I'm sure I've done it before, starting a bar chart not at zero. But once you
Yeah.
realize why that's a whoopsie, then you say, oh, this actually is misleading. That's not what I mean to do. That doesn't align with my intent here.
Hmm.
So always fall back on what's true, right?
Mm.
I have a little mantra at work that is, we do not edit data for aesthetic purposes, right? So if you have an outlier or something that is inconvenient in your visualization and it makes it look less cool, you have my full sympathy, but we need to hold ourselves to that. We do not edit data for aesthetic purposes. We don't lie,
Yeah.
right? Essentially.
Right.
Other than that, I think knowing knowing the rankings of encodings, right? Oh, certain encodings work better or worse for different types of data. And this is
Mm.
measured, right? This is just based on our minds and our perception systems. That lets you maintain a little bit of creative liberty, but no, but also kind of guide you in what's a good choice. Because there are situations where you want to say, look, this could be objectively the best length, position,
Mm-hmm.
whatever, but I need something fun for whatever reason. And so
Mm-hmm.
you want to kind of say, I see that, I respect that. I'm going to go with something that maybe is less good, but is way better ultimately because it's fun and people pay attention to it. Or you have a
Yeah.
wall of bar charts and you need a way to distinguish one concept from the other.
Right.
I think that's great. I don't think there's any need to be overly severe in that sense, as long as
Yeah.
you're not lying and you know why you're making that choice.
Right. How do you think about the one of the things that I struggle with is, and I see this a bit in your book, but I see it in certainly the case in my book and many other books, is
Hmm.
sort of like the classic. A lot of the books focus on the classic graphs. I think your book, my book, there's a handful of others that sort of
Yeah,
push, like there's lots of other stuff that people don't know about. But then there's
totally.
like more of the like infographic design things, like, and even not like an infographic,
Right.
but like a timeline or a flow chart or just a diagram.
Hmm.
Like it gets into this
Yeah.
like there's not even like a bar chart. Okay, there's a standard. The bars go left to right and blah blah blah, and like,
Yeah.
but it has a structure. Whereas like a timeline,
Totally.
a line or a bar or a circle or a multiple. Like, so how do
Right.
you like within the book, or just in your work, or when you work with people when you're teaching? Like, how do you think about some of these
Yeah.
diagrams? Sort of give that introductory, yeah, kind of the same. Let me. I'm trying to distill my questions down. My head
No,
is
it's
still
great.
like not here, but like
Yeah.
if 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 CRC Press was to come back to you and say, "This is
Hmm.
great. We want you to do a sequel.
Hmm.
We don't want you to do data visualization for people of all ages. We want you to do
Right.
data diagrams for people of all ages."
Ah,
I know I'm sort of throwing
yes.
this like brand new book project,
Sure.
this brand new question at you right now, but like,
Yeah.
how would you think about those like basic guidelines of kind of visual types that are, I
Right.
mean, essentially super freewheeling? They're not like almost
Right.
no structure to them.
Right. Gee, I think, well, it's not the fun answer, but I might say I'm the wrong person for this. Um,
Right. I mean,
that doesn't,
that's totally fair. I mean, that's totally fair. I mean, I certainly like wave my hand at this question when it comes
sure,
up, and I'm just like, hey,
sure.
if you go to, I don't know, timelinestoryteller.com, or if you go to Vengage, or
Yeah,
these other sites, and you look at
yeah,
timelines, there's like a million options right away. So like I can't
right,
give
right,
you
right.
really rules of thumb even, because but it's something I
Yeah,
struggle with a little bit, because I think a lot of people do, like an org chart is a pretty common thing that people make, and they
sure,
want to make them look good. And so, but like,
right.
it's kind of hard to like give them like even
Yeah,
the basic, right?
it's true because they also are everywhere, right? Anybody who's
Right.
worked in any corporate environment or has seen many of these infographic, yeah, they're kind of
Yeah.
just chart-based things. I think so I don't know how to write a book on that because
Right.
I like you and it just isn't, I guess I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
maybe too
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
I'm too structured in how I think. Um, but even outside of that being my comfort zone, I think we can dissect a lot of these charts and still see this language of encoding.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they still inform each other, right? You
Right.
have a flow chart that's everywhere, it's going all over the place, but there are some of the ribbons that are thicker than others. That means something. You get
Yeah.
chosen to
Right.
make some areas one color, and perhaps there's a gradient between them. That means
Yeah.
something.
Right.
And so even if I'm not the right person to tell you how to make a great infographic, which I will reiterate, I think there are great infographics and I appreciate them. It's just not
Yeah.
my area.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
do think
Right.
they are very close cousins, right? There's a
Yeah.
lot of um, they inform each other, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of interesting to think about what an underlying structure
Yeah.
of kind of the diagram world is. And I'm just thinking about like,
Right.
as we're talking, I think about like my kids, right? Like
Yeah.
my daughter's in high school, and making like
Hmm.
for her, like biology classes, like she's making
Sure.
flowcharts all the time, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
and so I think yeah, I mean, this might be where you and I have to write the book together, because only two
Yeah.
people who don't know what they're doing can write something that will help people.
Yes,
Um,
yes,
yeah.
yes.
Um,
I will
yeah,
say I did address networks, which was a great learning opportunity for me as well, because I just
yeah,
had never really sat down and thought, right, like explain it like I'm five. How do
yeah,
you explain networks to someone who is a complete blank slate in the world of
right,
networks?
right.
And that was really interesting, and a funny thing to fit in, right? Because like connection is not really an encoding, but it also definitely is.
Right, right,
Um,
for sure.
and it's, I also really wanted to include it because of because of all the Sankey diagrams that I've
Yeah,
come across in my lifetime, and they are confusing.
yeah,
They are
yeah,
cool. They are
yeah,
cool and wiggly and confusing.
yeah,
And so, just for the sake of humanity, it's like, well, maybe we would all benefit if we had sat down to think a little bit more carefully about what these mean. Um, or selfishly, just so I have an excuse to also think about them carefully.
Well, I mean, that's the thing about writing and teaching, right? Like you really learn the
Yeah.
content when you have to do it. Yeah. Um, so I wanted to ask, before we finish up, I'm pretty sure I know what your answer is going to be, but do you think data science should be part of the K-12 curriculum? And then, of course, if so, like,
Mhm.
what should be cut? Now we're right at the end of the school year here in Virginia, and my kids are,
Yeah.
for those classes where like their exams, the AP exams
Mhm.
are done or whatever, they're just like
Yeah.
watching movies. So they've got several weeks, they could do it right now, but okay. But
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
generally
Yeah.
speaking, like,
Yeah.
do you think database should be a core part? And then what would you sort of push out?
Right. What do you trade? Um,
Yeah.
well, firstly, I will say I was raised by a public school science teacher.
Okay.
So I know firsthand just the pressures and restrictions and constraints that they're under.
Yeah.
so, so let it be known, this is not something that we can just dump on teachers as
Yeah.
an
Yeah. Right.
addition and hope that it works out. That is,
Yeah.
no, strongly disagree.
Right.
That said, of course, I think that it should be part of the curriculum. It should be in the water as soon as we can possibly get it there,
Mm-hmm.
because it's not just one skill, it's thinking abstractly.
Yeah.
And there's no lower bound on that being useful, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I think anybody who can remember the journey of learning visualization can probably relate to this feeling of it just changing the way you see the world. It's this
Mm-hmm.
full other tool that lets you understand and appreciate and communicate information. Yeah, of course we need
Yeah.
that. We need it.
Right.
And I think something special about it is that even though, I put it in one book, you've put it in one book, it's visualization is omnipresent and it is a helpful learning tool in so many disciplines that I don't know, maybe we don't need to teach it in its own dedicated class. Maybe we
Mm-hmm.
don't need to swap out math content for visualization. The first bar charts I saw were in a history class,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you see them in biology. You see timelines, oil prices over time. Um, can we integrate visual thinking, visualization more pervasively instead of having it be one chunk of time?
Yeah.
That seems valid to me. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Right.
the short answer is I don't know,
Yeah.
but we cannot if we don't have the resources available, and also we can't teach what we don't know. And so that goes back to all ages, right? We have a lot of work to do to get everybody on board.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I don't know. I wish I
Yeah.
did.
No.
Yeah.
I'm with you. I mean, for me, in my thinking, I think it's a little easier at like the older ages, and I'm sure I'm going to ruffle a whole
Sure.
bunch of feathers with the next sentence, but like I think there's in math at least there's an overemphasis on calculus in high school, especially in the later grades. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, look, I have degrees in economics, and like I don't use calculus anymore, like in my day to day, right? Like like who needs calculus in their actual work? It's like engineers and economists, and that's kind of it, right? So like,
Yeah.
I would substitute statistics and probability for that. I maybe
Sure.
first,
Yeah.
but at the younger ages, which is where I think, to your
Mhm.
point, like you need to get to fourth, fifth, sixth grade is where you need to start.
Right.
And in my experience, my kids learned, it's kind of interesting actually. Like in our schools, they learned bar charts, line charts, pie charts, and histograms were like
Oh,
thrown in there as
interesting.
like a core
Yeah.
graph type. Now a histogram is, I guess, a bar chart, but like, you
Right.
get right. But so there's something, but I think, it is like everything's a trade-off. And like you said, especially in
Yeah.
certain states, what teachers can and can't do is like pretty strict. So
Yeah.
so it's so and yeah, like you said, like they're already overburdened, they already have to teach a lot of stuff, and so it's
Totally.
certainly hard, but we can continue having the good fight.
Yes.
Yes.
And I think there's room. Yeah, we can. We shall. But
Yeah.
there's room outside of the classroom too.
Right.
There's um, just activities after work or in the summer, like Gulrez's book, right?
Yeah.
Where he's just doing activities with his kids. That's
Right.
great. That's a possibility. Homeschools are a possibility. Like science camps type things.
Yeah, I mean,
Those
there's a
are
ton of coding
possibility.
camps now, right? Like,
There's coding camps.
yeah, I mean, it's out there for sure.
Yeah. Do you know those
But
little, I don't know if you have them where you live in your neighborhood. There are like little mini libraries that people will put in front of their house. They're
yeah,
like
yeah. The
birdhouses.
little the little lending libraries, like on the front
Yeah.
lawn. Yeah.
I've been putting copies in them in my neighborhood.
That's so good.
Kind of my
That's
like
so good.
guerrilla marketing, but
Right.
they're disappearing. I think there's a demand. I go back and it's not there the next day, so I put another.
Oh, interesting.
Right?
That's
so
interesting.
I think there is an appetite for it. Now I don't, I'm not like, I don't have a camera. I don't know who's taking these books.
Right.
But someone is.
Yeah.
Right. And I think a lot of it is that people don't realize that visualization is a full discipline. Like what your kids are learning,
100%.
visualization is bar charts and pie charts.
Right.
And like, how often have you heard the joke, "Oh no, 3D pie chart," right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like you could write on an index card like the sentences that you just hear over and over, and that would be the extent of common knowledge. I think people don't know that it's there. And so if we can also just get that switch flipped of like, oh, it is there. And it's not rocket science. And it's actually very inclusive to different ways of thinking and people and personalities. And if we're not judgmental, right? If we're a little open-minded to it not being too strict.
Yeah.
I think that will sell itself.
I totally agree. I think it's also interesting when I think about like the sports world, because there's so much data in sports. Like NHL has this new thing called NHL Edge, which is like deep data dives, like super like where the players shoot on the ice, right? And they have this new website and like, but I think my guess is when people go to that site and they see what you kind of have is like the ice rink. It's an image of the ice rink, kind of. It's like basically a heat map of the ice rink, right? And my guess is if you ask people about that, is that a data visualization? They would probably say no, right? Because it's like it's not a bar chart or a line chart where that's what people think of, right?
Absolutely.
And it's broader than that, and
interesting.
So
I'm not a hockey person. The heat map that you're describing, what kind of gradient is it?
It's gray.
It's gray.
It's a sequential for every team and every player.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they made this decision because they just didn't want to have to deal with different hex codes or like, but like for every player, every team, when you select and it changes the map, it's a light to dark gray, sequential color ramp, which I find it's fine. It just kind of like the page doesn't look as vibrant, right? You would think like if you pick the Seattle Kraken, you would get like a really cool green or blue. And if you pick the Washington Caps, you get like the red color. But everything is the same color. So,
but it's not the jet palette. It's not rainbow.
It's not rainbow. So I don't. Yeah. So they've got that. But
interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. But I do wonder. My guess would be that most people like instinctually wouldn't say, "Oh, this is like a really cool data viz," or even a dashboard, even though that's really what it is, because it's not like bar chart, line chart, pie chart, and
fascinating
for better for worse, whatever that is. So, all right. Well, Nancy, thanks so much for coming on the show. New book,
thank you.
Data viz for people of all ages. Before we go, where can people find you to ask you questions, connect with you?
That's great. I have such a quiet social media presence. I am most active on LinkedIn.
Okay.
If that interests people, that's your best bet. Is LinkedIn.
Great. Sounds good. Well, you can
I'm a little bit analog.
Yeah, that's fine. You get that flood of connection requests on LinkedIn. So. All right. Thanks so much for coming on the show. This was great. Really great.
Thank you.
Meeting you and chatting about the book and congrats again.
Thank you so much.
Thanks everyone for tuning into this episode of the show. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you have a restful summer. I hope you take some time out to spend your summer with friends and family. Head on over to the beach, do some swimming, do some relaxing, do some reading, and do some listening to your favorite data visualization podcast, the Policy Viz podcast. So thanks again for listening. Have a great summer. Until next time, this has been the Policy Viz podcast. Thanks again for listening.